We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Aleph and Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 18a. The Gemara is continuing Ravina's question to Rava. What if the person writes the get v'yosvei b'kisses and he puts it in his pocket? The mefayis tefayis. That way, if he makes up with his wife, so he won't use it. He has the get just in case he needs to use it. So, what are you going to say in that situation? Rashi says v'yosvei b'kisses yomim ravim. He puts it in his pocket for many days. The mefayis b'hadei b'kitata shebeneim. If they make up and they no longer fight, so tefayis v'lo yigrashena. So then they'll make up and he won't divorce her. Now, if they don't make up, so then he divorces her. So then when the get gets to her, so then she'll be divorced at that point in time. And we'll skip this Rashi to the next Rashi. So in such a situation, we have this takon of putting a date in the get, but it's not going to help in this situation because he's just putting the get in his pocket. The date is going to be wrong. Whether we're talking about with regards to the peiros, the fruits of the nechsei malug, or whether we're talking about the znus, you're going to have over here a predated get. So if you're talking about znus, she'll be able to claim that she's divorced before she was actually divorced. And in terms of the peiros, so she'll be able to collect from the lakuchos from the time that from the date that's written in the get, which again is too early because she doesn't receive the get until much later. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Lei, Rava said back to Ravina, Lo mak diminish poranusa lenafshi. We don't have to worry about such a situation because people don't bring a punishment early to themselves. Rashi says, Lo makdim lo regili lemebad hachi, meaning people don't generally do this. La nuche bekise, to write again and put it in his pocket. The kaven de lo nichole begerishin poranusu lagabe, because since he doesn't want a divorce, clearly he wants to try to solve the situation. He views that as a poranus, as a punishment. The lo makdim le, and people are not going to bring the punishment early, so to speak. They're not going to write the get before it's really needed. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina said to Ravashi, Gittin haboim mi Medinas Hayom. What about Gittin that come from Medinas Hayom, from far away, from Chutz La'aretz? The Michtavi b'Nisan v'lomatu aTishrei. They're written in Nisan, but they don't reach the woman until Tishrei. Mahuilu chachamim b'takonasum. So what do the chacham help in that situation? Again, you have a situation of a predated get. Amar le, so he said to him, Hanu kola islu. Those Gittin, they have a kol, meaning to say everybody knows about them. And as Rashi explains, Kali Islahu, Uvein Linyan Znus, Uvein Linyan Peros, whether we're talking about the issue of Znus or Peros, Boile Suye Raya, Emas Mataki Deliad, in those cases, a proof is going to need to be brought when the get actually reached her. Everybody is aware of the fact that those Gittin are coming from far away. And the Gemara continues, Itzmar, we have the following Machlokas Amuroim, Me'emasai Monin Leget. From what point in time do we count in terms of get? Rashi explains, Me'emasai Monin Leget, Gimel Chadashim Shoisha Tzricha Lahamtin. There's a general rule, when a woman gets divorced, she has to wait 3 months to marry someone else. That way we can avoid having a situation where we don't know who the child is from. We don't know whether the child is from her first husband or the second husband. The way to avoid that is she waits 3 months to marry someone else. And so the question over here is, from what point in time do we count those 3 months? Rav Amar says, Mishas Nasina. Rav says we count from the time that the get is given. Shmuel Amar Mishas Ksiva. And Shmuel says we count from the time that the get is written. And the Gemara says, Maskif lo Rav Nasan Baroshia. So Rav Nasan Baroshia asks Shmuel, but according to Shmuel, Yom Rushtei Nashim B'Chatzer Achas, you can have a situation of 2 women, 2 wives in one Chatzer. Zu Asurav, Zu Mutaris, this one's going to be prohibited, and this one's going to be permitted, meaning to say you'll have a situation where they both get the get at the same exact time, but in one case the get might have been written earlier, and so therefore she's allowed to remarry. It's already been 3 months since the get was written, and in the other case, the get was not written earlier, it was written the same day that she got it, and so then she's going to be prohibited. She'll have to wait 3 months. Rashi explains, Beis Nashim B'Chatzer Achas Shel Adam Echad. You have 2 wives, it could be 1 husband. Shapira Shliyam, he goes far away, Masar Shnei Gittin L'Shnei Nashav Bo Bayom. He gives 2 Gittin, each of his wives gets a get that day. Ela Shezek Kadam L'Zek Sivasa Chodesh, but this one maybe it was written a month earlier. V'L'Shmuel Zuti Nasi L'Sov Beis Chodashim. V'Zu L'Sov Gimel, it's going to come out according to Shmuel. 1 gets married after 2 months, 1 gets married after 3 months. Yitmu B'nei Adam Sherosh and Esgar Shabiyom Echad. People are going to be shocked by this because they're going to see they were divorced on the same day, and yet they're getting married at different times. So how could Shmuel be correct? And the Gemara answers, Amar le Abaya. So Abaya said to him, Zuzman Gita Mochiach Oleh. V'Zuzman Gita Mochiach Oleh. It's not a problem at all. This one, the date on her get, shows when she's allowed to remarry, and the other one has a different date on her get, and that shows when she is allowed to remarry. There will be no confusion over here, because the dates are clearly written on the Gittin. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavase the Rav, Tanya Kavase the Shmuel. We have a brisa that supports Rav, and we have a brisa that supports Shmuel. Tanya Kavase the Rav, we have a brisa that supports Rav. Hasholech get l'ishto v'nishto shlech b'derech gimel chadashim. If somebody sends a get to his wife, and the shliach takes 3 months to travel in order to deliver the get. Kashigia get liyada, when the get reaches her, tzricha lahamtin gimel chadashim, she has to wait 3 more months. Well, get yashan ein choshen, we're not afraid of a problem of a get yashan, sharelo nesyach erima, because there was no time where the husband was in seclusion with his wife. And so therefore over here you have a support for Rav, because essentially we're saying over here she has to wait an additional 3 months from the time she actually receives the get. Tanya Kavase the Shmuel, we have a brisa that supports Shmuel. Hamashlish get lishto, let's say a person gives a get for his wife, but he gives it to a third party. V'yamar lo, and he says to this third party, Al tetaneu lo ela lachar gimel chadashim, don't give it to her until 3 months go by. Mishanasnu la mutares linase miyad, from the moment it's given to her, she's allowed to remarry immediately, because according to this brisa, like Shmuel, we go by the date that's written on the get. And again, this brisa says we'll get yashan and choshen. We're not afraid, or we're not concerned with the problem of get yashan, sharei lo nesyach, because there was no seclusion between the husband and the wife. And Rashi explains get yashan. What's the issue that the Brises are talking about with get yashan? L'kamon tanina de'ena de megarish beget yashan. Later we're going to learn that a person is not allowed to divorce his wife with what is called a get yashan, an old get. Ve'ezel get yashan. What is this get yashan? Kol shenisiyachid ima me'achar shekasvu. That simply means anytime the husband and the wife have been in seclusion together after the get was written. So that's never allowed, and that's why both of these Brises are saying get yashan is not an issue over here, even though it was written and she wasn't divorced immediately. But as long as the husband and wife were not in seclusion from after the point in time that the get was written, it's not a problem. The time, and what's the reason of this? Why can't there be seclusion after the get is written? Very simple problem. Maybe she's going to get pregnant and give birth to a child, and the pregnancy will happen between the time it was written and the time it was given. Then time's going to go by, and people are going to say, oh, she really got pregnant after the get, and really this all happened as a zanus. So in order to avoid that, we say once the get is written, they can no longer be together. Hamashlish again gives it to a third party. Masar get l'shlish kedei lagarsha bo l'sof gimel chadashim v'alach l'darko. He gives it to a third party. He says give it after 3 months, and the husband goes on his way. Muteres linasei miyad. According to this brisa, like Shmuel, she can marry immediately. Demishas ksiva maninan, because we count from the time the get is written, not from the time that she receives the get. And the Gemara continues. Rav Kahana, Rav Papi, Rav Ashi, Avdi Mishas ksiva. Rav Kahana and Rav Papi and Rav Ashi, they did from the time of the writing, meaning they said that the woman counts the 3 months from the time the get is written. Rav Papa, Rav Huna Breid, Rav Yoshua, Avdi Mishas Nesina, and Rav Papa and Rav Huna Breid, Rav Yoshua, they counted from the time the get is given, from the time it's received by the woman. V'hilchasan, the halachas Mishas ksiva, that we count the 3 months from the time the get is written. And the Gemara continues. Itmar, we have the following machlokas amoroim. From at what point in time do we say that the Shemitah can cancel the ksuba obligation? And the Gemara says it's a machlokas again. Amoraim Rav Amar Misha Tifko and V'tizgo. Rashi will explain this, but Rav says from the point in time that it is partially paid and that it is turned into a regular loan. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says Pagma Afal Pishalo Zakfa. If it is partially paid, even if it's not turned into a traditional loan, or Zakfa Afal Pishalo Pagma, even if it's changed into a traditional loan, but it's not partially paid. According to Shmuel, in both situations, Shemitah can cancel the ksuba obligation. Rashi explains, Me'emasai ksuba kishar shtar chov u'meshamtasa shvius, meaning at what point in time does ksuba turn into a regular normal debt, and shvius will cancel that debt. And so again, according to the first opinion, according to Rav, it has to be both tivkom and tizgof, which means mishativkom shatifra ktsas de golidaita domedes ligos v'lipar. In other words, part of it is paid once part of the ksuba is paid. So now already it's like a regular debt, a normal debt that's being collected. And so therefore, again, if it's also v'tizkof, meaning v'tizkof olav hamoser b'milva, now if the rest of it is now converted into a regular loan, the nafkala mishum ksuba ma'isa bezin, that it should no longer be considered a ma'isa bezin. At this point in time, the ruling is she's allowed to collect, she's begun to collect, and the rest of it is owed to her like a regular obligation. She'eno meshamed, if it was a ma'isa bezin, then Shemitah does not cancel. The chol Allah shem shtarcho, but now it's called a regular shtarcho at that point in time when both of these conditions have been fulfilled, and therefore Shemitah can cancel. But Shmuel says, Pagma keven de golidaite bepiron, karina be lo yigos. He says, even if it's just Pagma, if it's partially been paid, so now we have the pasuk lo yigos applies, and Shemitah can cancel, or zakva b'milva, or if she converts it, meaning to say, let's say verbally, she now says she's converting it into a regular collectible loan, so at that point in time, also according to Shmuel, we're going to say that Shemitah can cancel the loan. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavasi de Rav, Tanya Kavasi de Shmuel. We have a brisa that supports Rav and a brisa that supports Shmuel. Tanya Kavasi de Rav, Me'emasai Ksuba Mishametus Mishatifkom V'tizgof, Pagma V'lo Zakfa, Zakfa V'lo Pagma, Eina Mishametus Ad Shatifkom V'tizgof. At what point in time do we say that Shemitah can cancel the Ksuba obligation? It has to be Tifkom V'tizgof. You need both. If it's Pagma V'lo Zakfa or Zakfa V'lo Pagma, it's not going to be Mishamet. It has to be, again, both Tifkom and Tizgof. That supports Rav. Tanya Kavasi de Shmuel. We have a brisa that supports Shmuel. Ones, uknas, upitoy, uchsubas isha. So these are all various kind of fines that the Torah imposes. Let's say you have a situation of ones, a situation of rape, or a situation of motzi shemra. That's what's referred to over here as knas. Or you have a situation of pitoy. That's if a man seduces a woman. There's also a fine that the Torah says the person has to pay. Or ksubas isha. So in all of these cases, shazakfan b'milva meshamtin. If they are turned into regular loans, so then Shemitah, the rules of Shemitah apply, and the Shemitah can cancel the loan. V'imlav ein meshamtin, and if not, so then ein meshamtin, so then Shemitah cannot cancel that loan. Mehemasai is kafan b'milva. Now, at what point in time do we say it's considered that it's converted into a regular loan, into a regular debt? Mishas hamoda b'din, from the time that you actually go to court, meaning when the court comes along and says at this point in time this obligation needs to be paid, so now that converts it into a regular loan, into a regular obligation, and Shemitah can cancel that loan. Amar Shmuel says, Ksuba kemaisa bezdin damya. Shmuel is similar to maisa bezdin. Rashi explains, kemaisa bezdin damya, d'tanai bezdin, it's meaning it's a condition of bezdin, and it's similar to a maisa bezdin. What does that mean, it's similar to a maisa bezdin? Ma maisa bezdin nechtavin b'yom and nechtavin b'layla. Just like maisa bezdin, they can, if they issue a ruling, if a court issues a ruling, it can be written during the day, and it can be signed at night. So af ksuba, so too when it comes to the ksuba, nechteves b'yom, and nechteves b'layla, it can be written during the day, and it can be signed at night. Rashi says, Ma maisa bezdin chiyuve mishum psak dinu. The point over here is that when the court issues a ruling, at the time of the issuing of the ruling, that's when the chiyuv takes place. Even if it wasn't signed. Therefore, you have no situation of hakdama. There's no problem of predating over there, and it can be written during the day, and it can be signed at night. Af ksuba mishas ksiva de nichnas lechupa tekirav chasnasu chayil shibuda v'yafagav de lo echter. From the moment of the ksiba, when she enters into the chuppah, at that point in time, that's when the shibud is chal, even if it wasn't signed. It doesn't matter, therefore, if it's signed at night. And the Gemara continues, Ksubasi de Rav Chia bar Rav ichtem v'yom v'chtem v'layla. The Ksuva of Rav Chia bar Rav, it was written during the day and signed at night. Have a Rav Hasan v'lo amar lu v'lo midi. Rav was there, and he didn't say anything. And so the Gemara says, Leima k'Shmuel svirle. Let us suggest that he holds like Shmuel. Shmuel just said that Ksuba is considered like a Maisa Bezin, and it's fine if it's signed at night. That's what Rav seems to hold. And the Gemara says to that, not necessarily. Asuk and ba'osu inyan have. In that particular case, they were still dealing with the issue of marriage, and so therefore it was all considered like the same time. Rashi says, Asuk and ba'osu inyan have miksiva ad chasima. From the writing until the signing, they were still dealing with the issue. Ve'afilo b'shar shtaros kasher. And the point is, even by other shtaros, if you're asuk and boso inyan, so it's not a problem if it's signed at night in that situation. There was nothing unique by ksuba in that case. What was happening in that case would have been true by other shtaros as well. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brais Samar, Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok says, Lo shanu ela kashen asuk and boso inyan. This halacha by other shtaros, that if it's written during the day and signed at night that it's a problem, that's only if they're not asuk and boso inyan. Aval asuk and boso inyan kosher, but if they're still dealing with the issues pertaining to the shtar, so then it's going to be kosher. And Rashi explains, Lo shanu de shtaros hanechtavim b'yom and nechtavim b'layla psulim. We only say that shtaros that are written during the day and signed at night that they're puzzle, that's only true if they're not asuk and boso inyan. Aval asuk and boso inyan kevan sho edim mizumonim lachtam, as long as the edim are ready to sign. Ela shabal karcham tzrichim lahamtan at sheyisayim hasofers hashtar. They just have to end up waiting because the sofer is finishing up writing of the shtar. So afagav de isrim yilei chasim alor. So even if it turns out that they sign at night, kosher, that's kosher. Sharei mishas ksiva nami is like kala, because already the coal has went out from the time that it's written. Everybody is aware that the shtar is being drawn up, and the fact that it's signed a little bit later is not going to pose a problem. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Shimon machshir. Rabbi Shimon says that if you have a predated get, it's still kosher. Amar Rava says, my time with Rabbi Shimon. What's the reason of Rabbi Shimon? Kasavar, because Rabbi Shimon holds kaven shenosan ein of lagar shashuvein lo peres. At the moment that the husband already sets his eyes to divorce her, once that process begins, so he no longer has a right to the peros. And Rashi explains, Ein lo peiros, he has no peiros, v'chi tarfa mizman ksiva, so if she collects from the time of the writing of the get, but in tarfa, that is just that she's collecting from that point in time, and therefore it doesn't matter that it's predated, because on the contrary, the peiros actually do transfer from the date, from the time that it's written. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reish Lakish says, Lo hichshir Rabbi Shimon ela la'alter. Rabbi Shimon only says this is okay if it is immediate. Aval mikan v'yad asara yamim lo, but if it's from now until then, 10 days from now, then already it would be a problem. And Reish Lakish means to say that if they sign it the night after, so then it's going to be okay, but if there's an extended delay from the time of the writing to the time of the signing, then that is going to be a problem, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis.